So we talked about positive statements and normative statements. Now we're going to move into economic models and such. So we have observations and measurements. So economists use observation and measurement to keep track of the amount and locations of natural and human resources. So that would be wages and hours, prices, quantity of goods, quantity of goods and services. Again, looking at super small font. Okay, so observation measurements. Economists keep track of the amounts and locations of natural and human resources, wages and hours, prices, quantity of goods and services produced, also taxes, government spending, quantity of goods, quantity of goods and services that are bought, so we're looking at both what's being produced and also bought and sold to other countries. And then in the chapter it talks about model building, so economists we use models to describe variables and things, and so instead of just saying something verbally, draw nice graphs, do models, and that way we can compare and see what's happening with like two different variables. We can compare and contrast things. And then with an yes.
I'm sorry, could you say what economists keep track of?
Yeah, so with the observation and measurement, or is this most, okay. So with observation and measurements, they keep track of the amount and locations of natural and human resources, so wages and hours. They also keep track of prices, quantity of goods and services produced, taxes, government spending, quantity of goods and services bought and sold to other countries, and then with model building, an economic model describes some aspect of the world while leaving out certain factors and focusing on only one thing. So instead of looking at the economy as a whole, if we just want to know how does the price of apples compare to the price of oranges, we just focus on those, leaving out bananas and other fruits and vegetables and other prices. So, model building, an economic model describes some aspect of the world while leaving out certain factors and focusing on only one thing.
Could you repeat that?
Yes. Model building. An economic model describes some aspect of the world while leaving out certain factors and focusing on only one thing. So it's telling how a number of variables are determined by a number of other variables. let me know if it pops up on there. Okay, that's not working, so I'll try again tonight. For now, I'll switch back to talk. Alright, so model building, everybody have that down? And then, you guys have done the reading, so what's an economic theory? Okay, Bea?
It's like, it summarizes, like it summarizes a certain idea.
Right, so everybody knows what a theory is, kind of something you just project and throw out there. So it's just basically a generalization that summarizes what we think we understand about the economic choices that people make and the performance of industries and entire economies. So, oh, it's purple today. Econ theory. Generalization. That summarizes what we think. Hey, we're up. Okay. Okay. It will be a lot easier if this is gonna work. At least you can see some of it, right? Can you all read it? It's too small.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, we're on the wrong. There we go. So, the economic theory, a generalization that summarizes what we think we understand about the economic choices that people make and the performance of industries and entire economies. There we go. Who knows Latin? Anyone? I took a year of it in college, but that was years ago. Yeah. So we have the Certis Paribus. So basically, other things being equal, or if all other relevant things remain the same. So just pretty much everything else remaining the same, we're just focusing on those one or two variables. And this can sometimes be a problem with an economic model because we observe the outcomes of simultaneous operations of many factors. So sometimes when you're holding other things constant, it doesn't always work out that way because there's many variables involved with everything. So economists are looking for pairs of events in which other things were equal or similar, and they use statistical tools, which is econometrics, and when possible they perform experiments, I can't talk today, which being aware of being aware of possible fallacies. I type these up at like 11 o'clock at night. My eyes are like falling through. So we're looking at pairs of events in which other things were similar or equal. So we could compare like one country's economic growth to another country's economic growth, where other things are considered equal. And then there are some fallacies that can show up in economic models. So the fallacy of composition. What is true for the whole may not be true for a part. So there's an example of the broken window theory. So in a small little town, a little hoodlum throws a rock at a window of the baker's store, and the window breaks. So the little hoodlum runs off, isn't caught, and so now the baker has this broken window he has to fix. And let's say it costs $300 to replace that window. Well, the town is like, well, this is great, because now that $300 is gonna go to the glassmaker to build this new window, and then the glassmaker is gonna spend that money on other stuff, and therefore it kind of has a positive effect on the economy. But what they're not realizing is, for the baker, he now has to spend $300 that he may have used to buy like a new suit on the new window now. So he's not better off, whereas everyone else might be. So what is true for the whole might not be true for the parts. Does that make sense? Yes. And then the post hoc fallacy, post hoc ergo propter hoc. After this, therefore, because of this. And this is an error in reasoning. So this is looking at the first event caused a second event, because the first event had occurred before the second event. So in the book, it used the example of Christmas shopping. So if someone came from another country and they didn't understand Christmas and all this Christmas shopping that's going on, they may think that the shopping is what caused the holiday, versus because the shopping comes before the holiday. Did you guys all understand that when you read it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an error in reasoning. You think just because something happened first, it caused whatever happened second, when that may not be the truth or what happened. Alright, so once you got that down, we're going to move into chapter 2, Wonderful, Wonderful World of Graphs. Did everyone get a chance to read chapter 2 last night? Yeah. How close were you guys to being homework? Alright, so do you want me to repeat anything? Would it make it easier than pointing out? Holly, is it coming through pretty clear?
Because I cannot see it from back here, so I'm just looking on
Okay.
the screen. Sorry.
Alright, Lauren, how are you doing back there? Can you see it okay?
I'm good.
Great, so there's another desk, you can just move it somewhere else if you need to. Maddie and Sydney, you can see it okay? Can read them. When I put this together, it was kind of smaller print, I didn't know how large it would appear on the board. So once I realized, I went through a couple examples last night, I went through and made some of them bigger, like further off, so hopefully it'll get easier. And I also put less information on the slides, so it'll be bigger. Alright, so post hoc fallacy, after this, therefore because of this, an error of reasoning that a first event caused a second event, because the first occurred before the second. And the example is Christmas shopping. Just because the shopping occurs before the holiday doesn't mean that the shopping caused the holiday. So just looking at one thing doesn't always work, so we use models to disentangle cause and effect. Madeline, do you have a question? Just comprehending all of that? Okay. Alright, we're gonna move on because I want to get to some homework problems before class ends. Graphs convey statistical data and reveal relationships among a large number of variables. So a couple days ago, I was like really excited about doing this presentation and trying to make my own graphs on here. This is actually in the book on page something in chapter 2. It's like the first graph in chapter 2. Okay, there. So on page 20, same thing. So it's just looking at the origin, it's the center. You have your x-axis, horizontal, your vertical axis is the y-axis. So anything above the x-axis is positive, thing below, negative over here. So moving from left to right, you have negative, and then right to left, you have positive. So I'm actually gonna move back, so this is in your book. A scatter graph plots the value of one economic variable against the value of another variable, and is used to reveal whether a relationship exists between two economic variables. So with this particular scatter graph, there's no clear relation. There's points all over the map. So we can't really conclude anything from this. There's no relation between the variables that are being compared. So again, scatter graphs plot the value of one economic variable against the value of another variable, used to reveal whether a relationship exists between the two economic variables. Okay, and then some other examples of scatter graphs. So the scatter graph shows a relationship. So as variable A increases, so does variable B. So you could get out a ruler and mark a line through the center of those lines or plots, so you can see that there is a positive relationship. And this one, this is figure 2.2. So as the price of variable A has fallen, the quantity has increased. So, can't mark the axes, but we have price on the Y. So as the price falls, the number of calls made increases. So we go from the price being up here about 15, no calls are being made, it's too high, but as this drops, more calls are being made to where you're only paying maybe 10 cents a minute, there's 15 calls being made. Follow that? Okay. Time series graph measures time, either months or years. So the months or years would go on the x-axis, and the variables in which we are interested would go on the y-axis. And then, so you can just plot one variable, or you can compare two variables on the same graph to see the relationship. So in the book, they're comparing unemployment with the budget surplus. So when unemployment is high, the budget surplus is low, and they kind of like go in opposite directions and then kind of mirror each other. So when we look at the budget deficit instead of the surplus, so this is like the extra money after all the bills are paid in a sense. But if we look at all the money that we owe others, when we flip the graph and look at the deficit instead of the surplus, you can see that they go together. So unemployment and budget deficit kind of coincide. Cross-section graph can be used to compare two groups, can be used to compare groups of people. So you can compare cities, states, countries, and then a ballet example. You can use this type of graph to compare the dancers in a color group to one another, and the hours they spend each week dancing. So, Sydney, what color is your group? Sierra, sorry. What color is your group for ballet?
Orange.
Orange. Okay, so orange dances more than, let's say, like teal during the week. So you could look orange, purple, pink, look at the different colors, and then how many hours they spend a week dancing. A positive direct relationship. So in A, as X increases, Y increases as well. So you have a positive relationship. They're moving together. In B, the further we move along the x-axis, the steeper that y becomes. So the variable y gets bigger faster. So positive becoming steeper. And then in C is steeper and slower. So y increases at a slower rate. It's kind of like inching along, whereas this one's kind of going faster. And all of these are positive relations. The next slide, we're gonna look at negative. I am going through this kind of fast, but this is all in your book. So, figure 2.7, the slope is decreasing or negative. So in A, as x gets bigger, so as the time playing tennis gets bigger, the time spent playing squash gets smaller. So if we spend 5 hours playing tennis, we spend 0 hours playing squash. And then we can also use academics down here and ballet here. So as we spend more time on ballet, we spend less time on academics. And B is decreasing at a slower rate, so negative is becoming less steep. So this is looking at the length of a journey in miles and the cost of trip cents per mile. So if you're only going a short distance, the cost for that trip is larger. But if you set cruise control, you're getting more miles per gallon, it becomes less expensive. So this cost drops, so it's negative and becoming less steep. And then with C, it decreases faster because it's a steeper curve, so Y is just dropping faster. So dropping faster, and that's comparing leisure time with problems of work, which, so I think that's a homework example. All right, everybody with me so far? Good. Maximum and minimum points. The highest point of an arc or curve is your maximum point. So this is looking at rainfall days and wheat yield. So 10 inches of rain is the ideal for 40 bushels of wheat. Less, you don't have enough, you're in a drought, it's not as efficient. If you get more than 10 inches of rain, there's too much and you experience negative effects as well. So the maximum yield is the highest point of the arc. Make sense? Okay. And then with the minimum, it shows a relationship. The curve slopes downwards because as it falls to its minimum, it is flat as its minimum and then slopes upwards. So the lowest point of your arc is your minimum, and this is speeds, miles per hour, and gasoline costs. So if you're driving about 10 miles an hour, stop and go traffic, you're using more gas, cost is higher. But if you're going 55, set cruise control, you're getting about 5 cents per mile. And the same if you're gunning your engine, you're going 95 miles an hour, it's not as price effective either. This is showing variables that are unrelated, so if you have a constant or a straight line, that means there is no correlation. So the price of bananas and the grade in economics, there's no relationship there. The same with output of French wine and rainfall in California. So if it's a straight line either on the X or Y, they're unrelated. The slope of a straight line, how close are we to Bell? Okay. The slope of a straight line, we can calculate this. It's going to take more than the 2 minutes we have left. So I'm going to go ahead and give you your homework assignment. We will be talking about the homework problems next week on Monday. So if you want to work ahead, otherwise we'll go over those in class. I'm not going to assign books, not going to assign problems from the book as homework. We'll go over it in class. Okay, any questions?
So there's reference to like worksheet you're giving us? Right?
Yep, this is another homework. It's pretty easy compared to what I just gave you. There probably will be a quiz or a test next Friday. I'm not sure which. Did everybody get one? I'm sorry. Shred, I pushed you to sleep, I'm sorry. Okay, so we'll start off Monday talking about the slope of a straight line, how to calculate it. I consulted an expert this morning. Mrs. Smith came over and we went through the homework. So I was like, I don't have an answer to you. I wanna make sure I'm not telling the kids around. So we sat at the kitchen table and worked out the stories and all the homework problems.
Is this over chapter one?
Mostly chapter one, I think there's some in two. And then, so the first question on your paper, it doesn't directly relate, but it kind of relates. So when an economist says there's no such thing as a free lunch, they mean that A, we must pay for everything we get. B, it's against the law to accept goods or services without paying for them. C, the more lunch a person eats, the more weight the person will gain. D, each day we decide to eat lunch is another day we must pay out money. Or E, every choice we make involves a trade-off. Where's that key term? You know one of those words in there, so you should be able to get that. So even though we didn't talk about there's no such thing as a free lunch, I think you can figure out the answer there. Okay? That was the bell. I'll see you guys Monday in class at the front desk.
This is not